Well, welcome everybody. It's the top of the hour. We sure appreciate you being with us today. We're really excited to present the first in a series of our provider wellness webinars. These are going to happen every month for the next few months. There's some really interesting topics coming up about how first responders can stay a little healthier. Really like to encourage you to go to the association website and check out all the upcoming events. If you need some continuing ed, the Northwest Regional Conference is online this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And the Northeast Regional Conference is going to be held in Grand Forks, February 7th through 9th. And there's still time to register for both. I've been looking at the calendars for these, the agendas. There's some really good classes coming up at both of these conferences. I would like to thank the members of the association's Mental Health Committee for the work they've done on all our provider series stories, and especially, of course, to Corey for all the behind-the-scenes effort that makes all this stuff work. Our presenter today is Ben Willey. Now, many of you know Ben from his involvement with our Provider Stories series, and he's a very active member of our Mental Health Committee, and we really appreciate all his help with that. Today, Ben is going to talk about really one of the most important things that emergency responders can do for our physical and our mental health, and that is try and get good restful sleep when we have the opportunity. This is part one of his presentations. Part two will be on February 20th, and we hope you'll be able to join then. I know Ben is going to leave some time for questions and comments, and I know he's looking forward to hearing from some of you. Ben is a captain with the Fargo Fire Department. He lives in Fargo with his wife of 23 years, and you can see their two teenage children there, Ben's wife and their children. He's been with the Fargo Fire Department since 2003. He was the captain of the training division from 2018 to 2023 and is now a captain in the suppression division. He's been an instructor with the NDFA since 2007, and in 2018 he was honored with the Instructor of the Year award. He's also on the Commission on Fire Accreditation International Peer Assessor, something I'd like to learn more about someday, Ben, when we have the time to visit. He's also the fire department representative for the EMS Association. So Ben, you're a busy guy, so I'm going to let you get right to it. Thank you for taking time to put your presentations together and for being with us today. Really looking forward to hearing some good advice for us.
Well, thank you, Lynn, for that introduction. As I said when we were talking about this in our committee meetings, it's either going to be insightful or you're going to get a good hour of rest having spent this time with me. But appreciate everybody joining in today. As Lynn said, we're going to talk about some protocols for understanding and optimizing sleep. The need for sleep is not new. I think it's fairly well understood by all of us, just in general. But it really started to become a focus for me when I did go into training, transitioning from our 24-hour shifts to an administrative role, 40 hours a week, the standard work week, and then transitioning back to shift at the end of my time in January of 2023, and recognizing just how tired I felt following even a single disruption at night. So it really got me thinking about how to take advantage of those times when I'm not on shift or when I'm not on duty, responding to calls, to make sure that I set a good foundation and set myself up for success for those nights where I'm not going to have a good night's rest. I listen regularly to a podcast the Huberman podcast, and I stumbled across this spring a guest series that he did with Dr. Matt Walker, who's the director of sleep science at the University of California in Berkeley. This was a 6-part series, roughly 2.5 hours to 3 hours per episode, so about 15.5 hours of content, and I've been through it twice, which means I still don't understand anything that they're talking about, but I gleaned enough information that I feel like I can share it with all of you today, and that's kind of where we're at with this. I just want to emphasize that I am not an expert. I am bringing the 30,000 foot view of this. Matt Walker, who was on the forefront of sleep study, is the expert. He's the one in the dirt digging up the information, has a deep, profound, intimate understanding. He shared that information with Andrew Huberman through his podcast. Andrew's a neuroscientist and really understands the workings of the brain. He developed some protocols on setting your circadian rhythm. So we have our on the ground, in the dirt. Then we have Andrew, at the 100-foot view. If I give myself more credit than I'm due, I might be at about the 10,000-foot view of understanding. And like I said, what I'm going to present is really going to be the 30,000-foot view. So we'll go through this fairly quickly. As Lynn said, we will come back next month. I've got a challenge for all of you when we get to the end of this. And there's also kind of a cheat sheet that you can use that will run you through the protocol. So we'll talk more about that towards the end. As we get started, what is sleep? Sleep can be divided up into essentially two phases: the non-rapid eye movement, or the non-REM sleep, and the REM sleep, which we'll see here in just a bit. The non-rapid eye movement, or non-REM, is denoted as a period of time where we have slow to extremely slow brainwave activity. And you can see with the graph on the left that kind of shows those EEGs or EKGs in each of those respective stages of non-REM sleep, which there are 4. Stage 1 is light sleep. It's kind of our best understanding, or the best understanding in the sleep world of what stage 1 is right now, is just a pass-through stage. As they continue to study this, they may find other benefits to stage 1, but right now it's kind of a pass-through stage to get us from wakefulness down into deep sleep. Stage 2 looks very similar to stage 1 in the 4 to 5 hertz of brainwave activity. The difference is, as you see in the middle of that graph, kind of that real rapid activity, that's referred to as a sleep spindle. So as we move into stage 2, we see these periodic sleep spindles, and those have an effect on our learning, which we will discuss in a little more detail next month if you're able to come back and join us. When we move from that light stage, stage 1 and 2, down into deep sleep, stages 3 and 4, we can see that brainwave activity really slow, down to 1 to 2 hertz, and then the amplitude increases. So the waves become slower and they become taller. All of that will make reasonable sense when we get into some of the reasons that we fall asleep, the chemicals and hormones and things that are involved. So just keep this chart in mind as we move forward through the discussion today. Once we've moved through our non-REM, our deep sleep, then we move into REM sleep. Most commonly noted with the rapid eye movement. So if you look at somebody that's in REM sleep, you're going to see their eyes moving back and forth very rapidly. As you can see from the graph, The brainwave activity is very similar to wakefulness. The difference is, so essentially your brain is awake, but your body's not, because of this phenomenon known as muscle atonia. It's essentially a paralysis. So your brain is working as if it's awake, but your body is paralyzed so that you don't act out your dreams. And rapid eye movement is commonly known as dream sleep. There's two exceptions to the muscle atonia, where all voluntary muscles are paralyzed. And those two exceptions are your eyes, which is why we see that rapid eye movement, and then also a muscle in your inner ear. And if they explained why that is in the webinar or in the guest series, I don't remember hearing it, so I couldn't answer why that would be the case. But at any rate, REM sleep, dream sleep, muscle atonia, those are just some interesting facts about that. So the non-REM and the REM sleep, as we progress through each, creates what's known as a sleep cycle. On average, a sleep cycle lasts about 90 minutes. And that's going to be shorter for some, longer for others. It really differs per individual, but that cycle remains constant for you as the individual. So if my sleep cycle is 82 minutes, it's going to be 82 minutes every time I cycle through. Whereas for Lynn, maybe that's 91 minutes, and it will constantly be 91 minutes for him. We average 5 to 6 sleep cycles per round of sleep. And it's important to note that cycles 1 through 3, so roughly the first half of the night, is dominated by the non-REM sleep. So we're getting much deeper sleep in the early parts of the night. And then the later half of our sleep, we're seeing more REM sleep. And again, when we talk next month about learning and emotional overnight therapy is what they refer to it, or sleep therapy, it's important to understand why we want to ensure that we're getting adequate amounts of both non-REM and REM sleep. So how is it that we fall asleep? First off, that circadian rhythm, I'm sure is a term that all or most of us are familiar with, is simply our 24-hour cycle of wakefulness and sleep. It's important to note, again, as individuals, it's not an exact 24 hours. It's not set exactly to the regular timing of a day. It can vary plus or minus around that 24-hour cycle. And over time, that variation can create those sleepless nights that we have periodically as our circadian rhythm resets or gets back in line with the day. And we'll talk some here in a bit on how we can best set or reset our circadian rhythm. There's also some hormones. There's tons of hormones, but the three major hormones involved in sleep are adenosine, melatonin, and cortisol. Adenosine is essentially a byproduct of metabolism within the central nervous system. So as your brain converts sugars and fats into energy, one of the byproducts is adenosine. As adenosine builds, it creates what's referred to as sleep pressure. So as we reach the end of our waking cycle, that adenosine builds up, adds that pressure, and drives us to sleep. Melatonin is another hormone that assists in us falling asleep, and that is generated in darkness or in low light periods. And then cortisol. Cortisol is what's commonly referred to as the stress hormone. So as we move through our circadian rhythm, our circadian cycle, in the morning, that cortisol is on an upward swing. By midday, it reaches its peak, and then it starts to diminish again towards bedtime. Um, as adenosine is building, cortisol is dropping, and they work in concert with one another, but in opposite mechanisms to create sleep. Along with that, our body temperature, and this is something I learned from the podcast. Your brain and core body temperature need to drop 1 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit in order for you to fall asleep. So the rule of thumb that they provide is to warm up, cool down, to fall asleep. And what they mean by that is warming yourself on the periphery, which dilates your blood vessels, allows blood to move to the surface of your skin, where we're dumping off heat, which then cools your core and allows you to drift off to sleep. Conversely, you have to cool down to warm up to fall asleep. So your core temperature needs to rise that 1 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit in order for you to wake up at the end of your sleep period. And we'll talk a little bit more on that as we get into the protocols. Lastly, our body position. I'm sure most of us find it much easier to fall asleep while we're laying down, and maybe even feel the need to lay down when that sleep pressure really builds up in periods of sleepiness or being tired. And the reason that is the optimal position is it allows more efficient blood flow. So as we're laying down, the heart doesn't have to work as hard to move blood to the periphery, which then allows that core temperature to decrease and allow us to fall asleep. So a lot of mechanisms at work here, which will all play into the protocols, as we'll see coming up. So that's how we fall asleep mechanically. So then what is good sleep? The mnemonic that they use is QQRT, and that stands for quantity, quality, regularity, and timing. And we'll take a look at each of those here as we move forward. So first off is quantity. On average, we want to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night or per bout of sleep. For some of us shift workers, that might be daytime sleep as opposed to nighttime sleep, but 7 to 9 hours per round of sleep. And this is the macro that most of us consider when we look at whether or not we had a good night's rest. I'm sure all of you have made a comment or have heard somebody made a comment. Yeah, I just don't get it. I went to bed. I slept for 9 hours last night, and I don't feel right this morning. I feel a little groggy, a little achy. I'm just tired, which is surprising because I got a lot of sleep last night. It's what we use most commonly to measure our sleep, and it's not always the best indicator of whether or not we are getting good sleep. Quality, then, on the other hand, is the continuity of sleep, and this is where that comment comes in. Yes, we had a quantity of sleep, but maybe we weren't asleep the entire time. You saw with that sleep cycle, we drop into deep sleep, we rise up to REM, and over a period of time, we actually rise up to just below wakefulness. After several cycles, there's a reason for that. It's that our body has been motionless for 4 to 5 hours, and that pressure is starting to build in some areas of the body. So we bring ourselves up to just below fully awake, so that we can reposition, find another comfortable spot to lay, and then fall back into a deep sleep. If we're doing that, moving up into that wakefulness period multiple times throughout the night, that quality of sleep goes down. You can see here from the bullet point, they denote essentially 85% efficiency. So 85% of that period of sleep, you are asleep, either in non-REM or REM sleep versus that sub-awake period. So again, we can have a quantity of sleep and not have a quality of sleep. Next is regularity. This is just the time that we go to sleep and the time that we wake up every day. And to improve and move ourselves towards good sleep, we should be meeting those times plus or minus 30 minutes every day. So if you regularly go to bed at 10 o'clock every night, you should be putting yourself down to bed between 9:30 and 10:30 every night, waking at whatever time, 6 o'clock the next morning, so that we have that 8-hour period of sleep. When we look at the protocols, this is the one that's going to be addressed. And actually, at the end of the guest series podcast, they had a Q&A, and one of the questions for Dr. Walker was, of the four, which would you think is the most important? And he very quickly spoke to regularity, having that regular sleep pattern. The other point that he made was timing. And timing sounds very similar to regularity until it's defined. So timing it's a genetic component to our sleep cycle. It kind of falls within our circadian rhythm, and it's referred to as a chronotype. We're all familiar with this. If you've ever heard someone refer to themselves as a morning person or a night person or an early bird or a night owl, they're identifying their chronotype in some way. And you can see here that they identify 5. So we have our extreme morning, neutral evening, and extreme evening. And it's based on the time that you naturally go to bed and the time that you naturally wake up. The low-cost way to determine what your chronotype is during a vacation with nothing else to do, you've gotten your sleep hygiene in order, you're fully rested. What time does your body tell you, now I'm going to sleep? And then, having had that bout of sleep without any interruption, what time do you wake up in the morning? That is your natural chronotype. The difficulty that we have, if you look at the timing of everything, our society, our culture kind of advantages those in the morning to neutral chronotype, which really forces those of us that are in the extreme on either end, or even the evening, that want to go to bed later or extremely early and get up extremely early. That forces us into a pattern that that runs counter to our circadian rhythm or our chronotype, which can diminish the quality of our sleep. There is an evolutionary benefit to this, and if you think about it, which is why it developed, and it is genetic. The benefit is, if an entire tribe or an entire society of people were going to bed at the same time, so say 8 o'clock and waking at 4, well, there's an 8-hour period there where the entire tribe is subject to predatory threat. If some of our group was going to bed at 8, others at 9:30, others at 11, and then others later than that, it reduces that 8-hour window, that 8-hour threat, down to just a couple of hours. So when we look at the survivability of our species, reducing that threat window obviously propagates the likeliness of of us reproducing and continuing to survive. So that is why these chronotypes exist. And if you can find work that allows you to stay within your chronotype, it's just going to help improve the quality um, of your sleep. Probably my favorite subject in all of this, naps, uh, is very, again, evolutionary benefit rather, that we have a drop in energy, or the postprandial dip, midday. A lot of our species began in warmer climates, and to take advantage of cooler periods in the morning, cooler periods in the evening, we have this drop in energy midday that allows us to shut down, relax, rest, and build ourselves towards being efficient and effective again in the later hours. So a nap can actually be a pretty natural and evolutionary part of our sleep-wake cycle. If you choose to nap, they are suggesting 20 to 30 minutes as the optimal amount of sleep for napping. Number one, that time frame will allow you to rejuvenate some energy, and then it prevents the buildup of sleep inertia. If you look at that sleep cycle, again, a 90-minute cycle, 20 to 30 minutes beyond the 20 or 30 minutes is when we start dropping down into the deep sleep stages of non-REM. So in order to avoid that, we wake ourselves artificially at the 20 to 30 minute period to avoid that sleep inertia. I would guess that many of us have experienced sleep inertia, which is just that groggy feeling after waking if you've either napped longer than you intended to, or for me in particular, that emergency call that comes in 30 to 45 minutes after I've fallen asleep. Get a very confused, nauseated feeling, loss of fine motor control, just heavy limbs, very hard to function until I've moved up into a period of higher wakefulness. In fact, a good example was just the other night. We had a call. It was it wasn't, but it was called in as a structure fire, possible structure fire. I was the battalion chief, acting battalion chief at the time. It took me 90 seconds to get my pants and shoes on and get down to the command vehicle and start on my way to the scene. I actually delayed leaving the building long enough to let the engine go ahead of me, because as I was rolling through what I needed to do next, I realized I don't think I can talk if I get on scene and need to give a radio report. So I'm going to let the engine go first. I'm going to allow them to establish command, and then I'll take it over if I need to. But that's how much I can be affected by this sleep inertia, and I'm sure it's maybe similar for some of you as well. One other interesting alternative to help us overcome this sleep inertia is what's referred to as the nappuccino, or the caffeine nap. Essentially what you're doing is, just before you lie down for your 20 to 30 minute nap, you drink a caffeinated beverage. They were talking about espresso, a small shot with a high amount of caffeine that you could drink very quickly, but even a small energy drink or something along those lines that you can consume fairly rapidly, and then lay down to take your nap. The way this works is that caffeine takes effect roughly 12 to 17 minutes after consumption. So by the time you're waking up from your nap, the caffeine is starting to take effect, and then you wake up more alert and ready to continue on with whatever activities you have for the day. The reason caffeine works for us, you may have recognized that caffeine and adenosine have a similar sound. Caffeine is a blocker of adenosine receptors. So just as Narcan or naloxone um, blocks opioid receptors in the brain, the caffeine essentially has the same effect on the adenosine receptors. So as that adenosine is building in your system, caffeine comes in, takes up those receptors, and then lessens the effect of adenosine um, in that period that the caffeine is in your body. So what then damages our sleep? Number one, poor sleep hygiene. And that's simply the regularity of our sleep, controlling the temperature of our room while we sleep. It might be our partner, if they're having a restless night or snoring, as we see in the image on the screen. A number of other factors affect our sleep hygiene, and we'll have a better understanding of that when we move into the protocols and what we're doing to improve our sleep hygiene. Rumination. This is an issue that profoundly affects my wife. Um, I'll hear that very often when we get up in the morning that, oh, I just couldn't get my mind off of this, or this kept me up all night. And that's not to say that I'm immune to it either, particularly if I have some large event or something that I'm doing the following day where I'm rolling through. I got to make sure I got this done, and I get this, and this is the first thing I'll have to do, and then I have to get this and go over here, make sure I bring this with. Oftentimes, just taking notes will help us eliminate some of that rumination, but we'll talk more on that with the protocols as well. Eating too close to bedtime can have an effect as our digestive system is working, drawing blood away from the brain and so forth. And they didn't speak a lot to eating in the podcast, so I don't have a lot of information on this, but they did mention that snacks or meals of high sugar and low protein will have a profoundly negative effect on our sleep. The circadian rhythm, as we mentioned, it's not a true 24-hour period. So as that rhythm gets off, even slightly, it can have an effect on our sleep overnight, and we'll look at ways of resetting that. And we get into the troubling stuff, the alcohol. Alcohol will actually prevent us from, I'll find it in my notes here to remind myself, will prevent us from moving into REM sleep. Um, it actually mimics deep sleep to some extent, but it creates a fragmented sleep. So yes, we're dropping into deep sleep. We're maybe getting the quantity, but again, we're not getting that quality, that efficiency that we're looking for. And then, of course, we're not reaching REM sleep, and that becomes important when we talk about learning and overnight therapy, what the brain does to help us deal with emotional events overnight while we're asleep. So we'll cover more of that next month. Caffeine. I fell for this. I used to, back when I drank soda, I would have um, Diet Mountain Dew or Diet Pepsi right up to the point that I'd go to sleep. And then say, well, caffeine obviously doesn't have an effect on me because I fall right to sleep. Caffeine does not prevent us from falling asleep. It prevents us from going into deep sleep. So just the opposite of alcohol, where alcohol will allow us into deep sleep and inhibits REM, caffeine will inhibit deep and allow us into REM. So they'll work opposite of one another. And again, it has an effect on our learning and how we're dealing with emotional events. Maybe less common, but cannabis can also have an effect. Particularly the THC in cannabis, it will help us fall asleep faster, but it often, or we will actually develop a tolerance. So you're going to require more and more and more cannabis or THC over time in order to help move into that sleep state. And just like alcohol, it prevents REM sleep. And if we were going to stop using THC, then it actually, during the withdrawal period, can result in insomnia, which is exactly the opposite of what we want to happen. Early studies do show that CBD in marijuana or cannabis may have beneficial effects, but too little of it can promote wakefulness. And there's not a lot of study in total on cannabis. More needs to be done, so that remains to be seen. So, and then lastly, the dreaded cell phone or other electronic devices. Most notably, the blue light in the phone, and the technology is advancing to eliminate that blue light at night. But that blue light will quash melatonin development, so that we're not moving towards sleep as readily as we would like to. But they also create what's known as anticipatory anxiety, which increases our cortisol levels, which counteracts adenosine and melatonin and can keep us awake. So, how do we overcome those dangers or those damaging items to our sleep? Before we get into these, I do want to emphasize these are only suggestions. They are not rules. What works for some might not work for others. And then re-emphasize that I am not an expert. I am simply regurgitating information that I heard and sharing the experience I had by implementing some of these protocols. You can adjust, use what you want, throw away what doesn't sound useful to you based on your lifestyle. And of course, if you try these and you still are not achieving the sleep quality that you need, consult your doctor or a sleep specialist. So, the protocols to optimize our sleep. Number one, we want to improve our sleep hygiene. We want to set our circadian rhythm. We want to get our mind off of itself. Don't look at the clock, and avoid eating before bedtime. And of course, avoid cell phones and electronic devices. So we'll look at each of these again very quickly here. Number one, improving our sleep hygiene. There's that regularity again. I'm sure all of us have the practice of setting an alarm to get ourselves up in the morning. One of the suggestions that's made is to set an alarm to start your nightly routine. So I regularly get up. Well, I don't get up regularly. It's varied based on my shift schedule. If I'm going into work, I will do my workout before arriving there, which gets me out of bed at about 4:40 every morning, so that I have time at the gym. If I'm on shift and I'm riding as the shift commander, I get up at 6. And if I am in my regular role as a captain, I get up at 6:30. And if I'm home and not around work, then I get up whenever my wife's alarm goes off for her to get up for work. So I'm not very good at the regularity. However, those weeks where I do maintain it, I do feel a lot better. I think because I'm following my chronotype and getting the restful sleep that I need. But setting that alarm, and then along with that, developing that nightly routine. So that alarm goes off. What does that tell me? That tells me I need to brush my teeth. I need to let the dog out one more time before we go to bed. Put on whatever I'm going to wear for pajamas or whatever the case might be. For me, my wind down is to read. Um, so finding my book, getting set up to read, things like that. Maybe it's a podcast or stretching, meditation, sleep stories, whatever works for you in that wind down routine. But finding something relaxing and going through that routine nightly to help associate that, okay, I'm moving towards sleep. You said darkness. We want to dim the lights in our home to about 50% 1 hour before bed. If it's summertime and the sun's up till 10 o'clock and you regularly go to sleep at 9, that means drawing the shades at 8 o'clock in the evening, shutting down overhead lights using lamps, things like that that start to bring the amount of light that we're receiving down, which allows for the development of melatonin, which moves us towards sleep. And then sleeping in total darkness or near total darkness, which might necessitate a sleep mask. So for us, with my pattern of waking at 4:40 in the morning or earlier, if I'm uh, earlier than my wife in most cases, I don't want to move about in the dark to disturb her. So we have a nightlight in our room, and it emits a blue light. And I really just need to change that over to a red one, which would be better for us. But we have that light present. Um, your cell phone or other electronics, as they're charging, there's usually a light on there that shows that they're in a charge phase. Anything else that you have in alarm clocks or things like that that emit light, we need to reduce that as much as possible, or again, take advantage of a sleep mask, blackout curtains, things like that to reduce that light in your room. Temperature is important as well. So as we said, we need to warm up to cool down to fall asleep. So the optimal temperature to set our room to is 65 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Um, the reason that works, as you're laying in bed with the covers pulled up, that warms your periphery, which allows you to offload body heat, which keeps your core temperature cool. As those blankets become saturated with heat, it needs to dissipate somewhere. And if the ambient temperature is too high, then it pushes that heat back down onto your body, and then your core warms up, and then you wake up. So 60 to 65 degrees, or 65 to 67 degrees, sorry, will allow for that heat to dissipate off of those blankets so they can continue to absorb body heat, keep your periphery warm, and your core cool. The next is walk it out. We don't want to associate our room and our bed with anything other than sleep, essentially. So if we're awake for long periods of time in the bed, we can start to associate that as an area that we're awake. The time frame that they give is 20 to 25 minutes. So if you're awake at night or even struggling to fall asleep and you reach that 20 to 25 minute period, it's advised that you leave the room. Find somewhere, go sit on the couch or the recliner, And then find some relaxing activity. Go back to your wind down routine, reading podcasts, stretching, meditation, sleep stories, until you feel sleepy, and then return to the bed and hopefully fall asleep. And then finally, be mindful of your caffeine and intoxicants. Um, Caffeine has a half-life of about 10 hours. That varies per individual and how quickly they metabolize it. But roughly 10 hours before bed, you should stop consuming caffeine. So for many of us, that's noon, maybe 1 o'clock at the latest, and then shut off your caffeine intake. This is one that I have implemented since listening to this podcast and can tell you that it has had a profound effect on the quality of sleep that I am getting. And then along with that, they're advising no alcohol or cannabis. If that doesn't fit into your lifestyle, then at least a couple hours prior to bed to allow your body to metabolize those intoxicants and hopefully allow you to improve the quality along with the quantity of your sleep. Next, we want to set our circadian rhythm. The first thing that we do for that is to get sunlight in our eyes, ideally as immediately after waking as we can. Now, this time of year, the sun doesn't come up at a reasonable time for this. So getting that sunlight as soon as you possibly can. Their advice is to take a walk outdoors or be outside and be in that direct sun. Roughly 10 minutes or so will help reset your circadian rhythm. It does not work through refracted glass. So if your normal morning routine is a 30-minute drive to work, that sunlight coming through the windshield is refracted in a way that you do not receive the benefits of this on your circadian rhythm. Same with having breakfast or a cup of coffee at the dining room window. Conversely to that, if you wear corrective lenses, those lenses are actually designed to draw the light into your eyes. So it's not like you have to stand out in the sunlight blinded because you don't have your corrective lenses on. Those actually have a benefit to it. But getting sunlight in your eyes soon after waking, roughly 10 minutes, will help to establish that waking period in your circadian rhythm. Next is eliminating or at least limiting blue light at night, so those electronic devices, as we talked about. Again, that helps with the development of melatonin and moves us towards sleep within our rhythm. We can also advantage cold water in the morning. Like we said, we have to cool down to warm up to wake up. So we have to cool our periphery to warm our core and wake up in the morning, which is why splashing cold water on your face or running cold water over your hands often has a rejuvenating effect. If you're a psychopath like me, you can start your day with a cold shower. It is not an easy way, and every morning I have a fight with myself to adjust the water temperature to cold, but it is something that I've implemented, and it does. It really sucks in the moment, but I feel spectacular when I get out, and usually keeps me rejuvenated throughout the day. Not only does it have the core warming effect, but it also increases that cold water, increases cortisol, which again brings us to a higher state of alertness. And then coffee or some type of caffeinated drink, warm caffeinated drink, has two effects. Number one, the warmth of the beverage will increase your core and brain temperature, and that's the immediate effect that you feel from your coffee, your tea, whatever you might be drinking. And again, the caffeine takes effect in 12 to 17 minutes. It is advised that if it works in your schedule, your routine, or your lifestyle, unless you're going directly into something physical, whether that be a workout or work related, you should try to abstain from any caffeinated beverages for about 60 minutes after waking. And that allows your body to naturally adjust to its circadian rhythm without artificially supporting it with the caffeine. Next, get your mind off itself. We want to take a mental walk, is one suggestion. So you're lying in bed, can't fall asleep, ruminating on different things that are going to happen the following day or into the future. Take yourself on a walk. This is a declarative memory function, and the more detail, the better. So if it were me, I would visualize myself putting on my tan, keen hiking shoes. My wife and I would exit through the door into the garage. We're going to grab the blue harness and leash for our dog. I see myself putting that on. I feel the anger that I often feel because the dog annoys me. We walk out the door, watch the garage door close, notice the smell of the petunias in the half whiskey barrel that we have next to the garage. Notice that, I forgot to blow the grass clippings off the driveway before I mowed or after I mowed, so I want to make sure that I do that when we come home. See the neighbors across the street. I can hear the birds chirping. The more detail you put into that mental walk, the better. And oftentimes, when I do that, I don't even make it to the end of the driveway and I'm asleep. So get your mind thinking declaratively as opposed to procedurally, and whatever effect that has puts you to sleep. We can practice breathing techniques. Box breathing is the one that I use most regularly, and that's simply an inhale of 4 seconds through the nose, hold for 4 seconds, exhale through the mouth for 4 seconds, and then hold for 4 seconds, and repeat that cycle. Very similar to the mental walk. If you're concentrating on your breathing, you're not thinking about anything else. The inhaling and exhaling has a cooling effect on the brain stem, which then brings down your blood pressure, your pulse rate, and then all of that helps move you towards sleep. You can listen to sleep stories. You can practice a mindfulness exercise, meditation, non-sleep deep rest. There's apps available for that. I would encourage you to look those up. I have used non-sleep deep rest before, and it has been very helpful. The one don't on here is don't count sheep. That's a procedural memory task, which does not prevent you from ruminating. And so despite what CERTA would have us believe, we don't want to count sheep. We want to be more declarative and take that mental walk. We don't want to look at the clock. As our sleep cycle ebbs and flows and we move up into the partial wakefulness, at times we move all the way into wakefulness. You'll often hear people say, yeah, every night, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm awake. And the question to ask there is, well, why do you know it's 3 o'clock in the morning? It's because you've looked at the clock. Now you tell yourself, I wake at it every morning at 3 o'clock. It starts to set that cycle, and then your brain just starts to function that this is when we're awake. It also, looking at the clock, it's like, shoot, I got a big day tomorrow. I really needed to sleep tonight. Now I've only got 3 hours before I've got to be up. Can I get back to sleep? I need to get back to sleep. And we ramp up that anxiety and increase that cortisol, which then keeps us awake. So their advice is to actually not have a clock in the room at all. But at the very least, don't look at the clock. And then use your getting your mind off itself practices. We want to avoid eating before bedtime, at least 1 to 3 hours. And like we talked about, the high sugar, low protein can have negative impacts on sleep. When you have those moments in the middle of the night where you have to take yourself out of bed, don't find yourself in the kitchen, and definitely don't eat any snacks in that overnight period. And then avoid cell phone and electronic devices. Again, that blue light has a negative effect on the melatonin. We have that anticipatory anxiety, as we spoke to earlier. And then we also want to avoid making our device the first thing that we do in the morning. So if your instinct is when your alarm goes off, you grab your phone, you scroll through social media, that teaches you that this is what I want to do, or this is what I need to do when I wake up. So then in the middle of the night, you wake, the first thing you do is grab your phone, scroll through social media, get a wash of blue light, increase that anticipatory anxiety, and now we can't fall back to sleep. So ideally we set those to a nighttime or a sleep mode so we don't receive the notifications and have trouble being woken up. So what happens when you implement some or all of these protocols and you still have that awful night of sleep? Well, first off, it's going to happen. That's just the natural order of things. And when it does, we don't want to change our routine. So you have that rough night, you've had a call that kept you up most of the night, or you just were restless and couldn't fall asleep. The worst thing we can do is take on excess caffeine or change our diet the following day. Along with that, if you don't regularly nap, avoid taking a nap, and just try to power through your day as best you can, obviously within safe limits. What that does is increase that sleep pressure. It allows that adenosine to build within our system, and then will hopefully help us fall asleep and get restful sleep the following night, which can then help us reset and start the next day. So there is a cheat sheet, and I believe it's attached to the, pull it up here. My brain works in outline format, so I built it in an outline. But it's just a simple reminder of the protocols that we talked about today. It should be attached, and Corey can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but you should have access to that. My challenge for you is to try some or all of these protocols over the course of at least the next 2 weeks, and in the following month. When we come back for part 2 on February 20th, then I would love to hear from some of you, or as many as would like to share, whether or not you saw a benefit to these. So with that, I'm coming right up on the hour. I appreciate everyone's time today. Hopefully you've taken something away that you will find beneficial, and I hope if you try these protocols that you find some that are useful and fit within your lifestyle. Rest well, stay safe, and we'll speak to you in a month. Lynn, if you have anything to sign off with, otherwise, thank you again, everyone, for coming.
just wanted to say thank you, Ben. Lots of good information there. I'm looking forward to some
Thank you for
Nappuccino.
everything, Ben. I really appreciate you taking the time out of the day, and I know I'm going to start practicing Nappuccinos, so I do appreciate you. So, thank you.